Welcome back. In this analysis, we'll explore a recent discussion involving Donald Trump's comments on Russia, NATO's response to a drone incursion, and the escalating tensions in Ukraine and the Middle East. What looks like a series of separate stories, sanctions, drones, strikes, and diplomacy actually connects into one larger narrative about global security and shifting power. Let's unpack it step by step. Trump has announced that he is prepared to impose major sanctions on Russia, but there's a condition. He insists that the United States will only act if all NATO nations take the same step, specifically, if they stop buying Russian oil. This is significant for two reasons. First, it frames sanctions not as an American-led effort, but as a test of NATO unity. And second, it puts pressure on European nations, many of which are still reliant on Russian energy. Trump's message is both a call for solidarity and a critique of NATO as slow or uneven responses. At the same time, NATO is dealing with a troubling incident. Poland reported a suspected Russian drone incursion into its airspace. Trump initially suggested it might have been a mistake, but Poland's president strongly disagreed, calling it a deliberate attempt to test NATO defenses. Retired Air Force Lieutenant General Mark Wetherington weighed in, saying that evidence suggests it was deliberate, citing consistent flight paths and scale. He argued the incursion was designed to probe NATO's response or gain an operational edge in Ukraine. This shows how even small-scale drone activity can send a big political message. Beyond drones, Russia has escalated its campaign in Ukraine. Attacks on civilians and infrastructure are rising, even as so-called peace negotiations take place. According to General Wetherington, this is no surprise. Russia has shown since 2014 that it does not respect Ukraine as a sovereign nation. The escalation demonstrates that while talks continue, Russia is doubling down militarily. For Ukraine, it means continued suffering for NATO. It raises a question: what happens if the conflict spills beyond Ukraine's borders? The conversation then pivots to the Middle East. Israel recently carried out a strike in Qatar targeting Hamas leadership. The strike was described as opportunistic but high risk. Wetherington noted divisions within Israel about the wisdom of this move. While some saw it as necessary, others feared the timing and potential fallout. The strike did not achieve its objectives and could undermine progress made under the Abraham Accords, the agreements that expanded diplomatic recognition of Israel in the region, instead of strengthening security. This action may have destabilized regional momentum. Against this backdrop, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is visiting Israel. The visit comes at a critical moment, as the U.S. must balance its support for Israel with its concern about regional escalation. Rubio's role highlights diplomacy's importance, but also its limitations. A visit can signal commitment, but it cannot undo the risks created by high-stakes military strikes. His trip underscores how the U.S. is watching events closely and trying to prevent escalation from spiraling further. Looking across these stories, one theme becomes clear: risk. Russia's actions test NATO's unity. Israel's strike risks undermining regional diplomacy. NATO's hesitation risks emboldening adversaries. The risk is not just military, but political and diplomatic, raising questions about whether alliances like NATO or the Abraham Accords can withstand moments of crisis. Each move, sanctions, drone incursions, strikes, and visits, is a piece of a larger chess game where the stakes are high and mistakes are costly. So, what does this all mean? Trump's call for NATO solidarity, Russia's deliberate provocations, Israel's high-risk strike, and Rubio's diplomatic trip aren't isolated events. They're interconnected. Signals in a world where security is fragile, alliances are tested, and leadership decisions carry enormous weight. Understanding these dynamics helps us see not just today's headlines, but the larger story unfolding across Europe and the Middle East.